All right, so we've got two types of data. We've got qualitative data, and that describes qualities or categories. And then we have quantitative data that represents counts or measurements. And within quantitative data, we can have continuous quantitative data, or we can have non-continuous, basically. Okay, so if we're thinking about continuous, we're thinking about like the total amount of rainfall over a month, a year, a week, something like that. And we'll get into that more. But qualitative data, again, describes qualities or categories. So it's important that we distinguish between the two. And of course, it can't always be cut and dry of like one has to do with numbers and one doesn't, because later we'll talk about customer ratings and how if the customer rating is given a definition of 0 being terrible and 5 being fantastic, because they are given those qualities to those numbers, it becomes qualitative data and is no longer quantitative. So there are times when the idea of numbers can actually represent qualities and not just quantities. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get farther down. So then we have types of tables. So we've got a frequency table, and it's a table that organizes data into two columns. The first column lists the categories of the data, and the second column lists the frequency of each category. The frequency is the number of data values in the category. And then the relative frequency is the fraction or percent of the data values that fall within a category as compared to the total frequency. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we have graph types. So we have a bar graph, and that is a graph that uses a set of bars to represent frequency or relative frequency of each category. Bar graphs can be used to display both quantitative and qualitative data. We have a histogram, and histograms are only used for quantitative data. And histograms the bars have a natural order, the bar widths have a specific meaning. The bars represent a span of data and they should touch. So the bars have to touch each other. So when we think about, let's say we have a whole big group of data, just numbers, right? We're going to break those into groups. So then we would have a bar that represented how many times the numbers 0 through 5 occurred. And then the next one would be the number of times that 6 through 10 occurred and so forth. And so that's a range of data, and we're counting the frequency that it's happening, and then it's grouping the data together that way. We have a line chart, and it shows the data value for each category as a dot. The dots are connected with lines. And then line charts are going to be used for continuous data. And the reason why it has to represent continuous is if we're connecting the dots with lines, that means that the line is representing all the possible points that happen in between those two dots, and therefore it's creating a continuous set of data. And then we have a circle graph or pie chart, and it's primarily used for relative frequencies. Each wedge is proportional to the relative frequency of the category. So if I have a pie chart, and I color it. Let's see, here's this piece there. And here's this piece here. And here's this piece here, right? So the purple section looks like half the circle, right? And therefore it needs to represent 50% of the data. The green section looks like it's quarter, so it's going to be 25%, and then that blue section looks like it's also a quarter, and so it has to also be 25%. So we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of creating a circle graph, but I want you to know that when they're making these, literally the angle of the pie section, that angle measurement has to be the same percentage out of 360 degrees as what that segment is supposed to represent. So there's a lot of math that goes into creating these. They're not just like pretty pictures that we have that are like, oh, well, it's supposed to represent this and this and this, right? There's an actual meaning behind them. But we're just going to use Google Sheets to make it for us. And that's some of the calculations that they're doing when they're making those. Okay, so we're going to classify the following types of data as either qualitative or quantitative. So when we think of the birth months of individuals. So yes, birth months can be have numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. But really this is January, February, March, April, and May, right? So birth months are categories. And so because they're categories, they become qualitative data. And if you need to tell yourself why, you can say months are categories, which is why we would decide that they're qualitative and not quantitative. So this is that example I was talking about, the responses of customers at a restaurant on a scale from 0 equals terrible to 5 equals fantastic. So because we're giving them definitions for the numbers, they become categories because we're thinking about terrible, not so terrible, mediocre, pretty good, and fantastic, right? If we were to separate out those numbers. And so it's not possible for us to give somebody a mediocre and a half, meaning a 1.5. And so because those numbers have categories assigned to them, it again becomes qualitative. So numbers have qualities or categories assigned. And again, we can see that because 0 is equal to terrible. So really, we're not looking at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're looking at terrible, meh, okay, somewhat okay, and great, right? Then we have the amount of rainfall in each month of a year. So because we're talking about the amount, that is a quantity. So right here, amount of rainfall is a quantity. Therefore, it is quantitative data. Okay, I want you to think about number 4 on your own. We think about flavors of bagels, right? We've got plain, cinnamon, raisin, everything, onion for the weirdos. No, I'm kidding. You can have like onion bagels if you want. What else, right? My husband's favorite of bacon cheddar. So these are literally, I'm using like names of things to represent these things, right? Therefore, we can tell that these are categories, which gives us qualitative data. If I can write properly. I don't know if I shared this with you previously. Just roll with it if I misspell something. I am a horrendous speller, like the worst speller, and I question everything as I'm writing it down. So just go with it. If something's completely misspelled, I apologize. It's one of my shortcomings, right? We all have them. All right, next page. And then we have the gold medal count for each team in the 2016 Olympics. This could have been the 2020 Olympics, right? We just had those. So we think about gold medal account. We're counting them, right? So each country, as the things go on, their counts increase, right? So this automatically, okay, we're talking about a count, right? That's a quantity. Okay, and with quantities, that's going to make quantitative data, right? But because when we think about gold medal counts, we can't have half of a medal, right? It's not possible for the United States to have 5.5 gold medals, right? It's either they have 5 or they have 6. So this is what we refer to as discrete. This is a DI, not a DE. So it's discrete data because it's individual amounts versus, like I was saying, over on the rainfall is continuous because it is possible for us to have fractions of units of rain, right? It's possible to have 11.5 inches or 11.25 inches or 11.33 inches or whatever, right? So you can have those fractional amounts, which makes it continuous, versus in this situation, it's quantitative, but it's discrete. We can't have fractional amounts of gold medals. Okay, so we're going to do this next part in Google Sheets. So we're creating a histogram for a set of data. I'm going to give you guys a new thing to look at. Okay, so let me blow this up so we can see it a little bit better. All right. So when we look at this, it says in order to create the frequency counts, we need to first name our set of data. So how do we name a set of data? What we're going to do is we're going to click on the first location. I'm going to hold my mouse key down and drag down through the last location, which is 96. Okay. And then there's 2 ways we can go. Up here, I can press, nope, I can press data. And I can name the range. Okay. Or let me select my data again. I can right click on here and also name the range. Okay, both of them are going to get what we want. So we need to define the name. So I'm just going to call this, what do I want to call it? I'm going to just call it data. I'm not going to be, how do I know that I'm naming the right set of data? Well, below this, it's telling me in histogram, that's the name of my sheet, because I can see right here, I've got it named histogram. It's going from cell location A2 to A21. So again, A2 is where that 89 is, all the way down to A21, which is where 96 is. So I know that it's covering the right set of data. So when I'm done, I'm going to say done. And it's named my data for me. Once you've named your data, you don't have to keep this open anymore. You can close this out. Okay. So the work that I'm going to do here in this section of our table is what Google Sheets does in the background when it's creating a histogram. So we want to use this function called COUNTIF. What I want to do is I want to count the numbers that are less than 65. Okay, so the COUNTIF equation. So when I'm here, I'm going to do equals count, COUNTIF, all is one, right? And I want to do COUNTIF, and I'm going to press a parenthesis, and then I want to do data. So I'm going to type out data, and the reason I know when I've typed the name of what I've named it, when that whole column shows up yellow, right? So if you named yours something else, it's not going to show up unless you put the name in that you put in for that range of data. Okay. So what I'm telling Google Sheets to do is find all the numbers in the set of data that are less than 65. So to tell the less than 65 part, I'm going to do a comma. I'm going to do quotations. I'm going to do the less than symbol. So to get the less than symbol is with the comma. So we're going to press shift and then that comma. And then I'm going to type in 65. I'm going to end my quotation and end my parenthesis. So can you all see that, or do you need me to make it bigger? Okay, so when I'm done, I'm going to press enter. And what this tells me is it tells me that I have 2 data points in this set of data that are less than 65. And we can find one right here, 64, and one right there is 60. So those are the 2 numbers in that set of data that are less than 65. Now, unfortunately, I can't, this is not one of those functions where I can just pull down and it'll redo it for me, because I need it to reference this. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I have to re-enter this. So I'm going to do equals count if parenthesis, and we're going to do data, comma, parenthesis, or excuse me, quotations. And now I'm going to do less than 70. Okay. So I'm just going to keep doing this. So I'm not going to keep saying what I'm doing if you just want to watch me, or if you're doing this on your own. Again, where am I getting these values? I'm getting it from that column C, right? So you can see I'm doing, so now I'm in where the less than 75 is. So I'm going to do in parentheses or in quotations, the less than 75. Oops, where did I mess up? Okay, so something I want you to notice is as we go through here, all of these numbers are increasing, right? And the reason they're increasing is that they're counting everything that's before it and then adding on to it, right? So in order to create our histogram, we need to now take that data and divide that into groups, okay? So our first bin is what they call it, is the numbers in our data that goes from 0 to 64. And 0 to 64 is the same as less than 65, right? So we are going to be able to create a recurring equation here. So less than, from 0 to 64 is the same as less than 65. So I'm going to do equals, and I'm just going to take D2 and pull it over there because those match up. Now, of course, it's giving me a suggestion. I don't want it to do that. It doesn't understand what I'm trying to do. So when it gives you a suggestion, you do not need to autofill. You don't need to take it, just X out, and then you can work on your next one. All right. So now I'm looking for the numbers that go from 65 to 69. Those numbers include the numbers that were also, when we were looking over here, this was everything less than 70, right? So less than 70 included the group that was also less than 65. So what we're trying to do is take those numbers from here, pull out the less than 65ers, and then what we're left with is the numbers that go from 65 to 69. So you can see we've already used 2 of these 5, right? So therefore we know that we want 3 of them left. So what we're going to do is we're going to do equals D3 minus D2. We're subtracting D2 off because we've already used those. And then we're going to press enter, and it's going to give me 3. Now, because we've created a recurring formula, we can tell it to fill down, and it will fill in our values for us. So questions about that part so far? So what I'm trying to get you to see here is what is Google Sheets doing in the background? Okay, what are they doing that we're not seeing? And what they're doing is, again, they're taking our entire set of data and they're breaking it up into bins based upon these count if statements. Okay. So the last thing we want to do is we want to insert a histogram. So all we have to do is highlight our set of data again. And then we're going to go up to this image right here, which is insert chart. I'm going to press insert chart. Now, Google Sheet likes to give you suggestions, okay? So it's not always the suggestion we want. Sure, we want a histogram, but you'll notice that this range goes from 60 to 68 when we want a range from 0 to 64 and then 65 to 69, right? We've set up our bins to be different, so we need to adjust that. So under the customize, here we're going to look at histogram. So right now it's automatically doing our bucket size. And instead of doing auto, we want to do by 5s. How do I know I want to do by 5s? Well, if I count, if I've got a range from 65 to 69, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, that's 5 items. That's showing me that all of my bins or buckets are in groups of 5. So we don't need to worry about showing item dividers. And then you can see down here, this is all we have to do in here, by the way. We'll just close that out. But you can see how I have 2 in that first group. Let's move this over here so we can see it a little bit easier. So seeing this 2 in this first group, I can see that I've got 2 here and the count is showing up. Okay. In the second group, I have 3, then 1, then 4, then 2, then 3, then 2, then 3. So again, Google Sheets is super powerful. It knew that we needed to count the individual data numbers. It did all of that. So that table there, we're not necessarily using it to create the graph, but it's allowing us to interpret what the graph means. And it's what Google Sheets is doing, those 2 steps. It's what it's doing in order to create the graph. So any questions about this histogram and how to create a histogram? In Google Sheets, again, we're not doing this by hand. I'm not making you do that. We're just letting the machine do the work for us. Okay. So then on the next page, we talk about with pie chart, right? So that's the other graph that we're going to create. So in your notebook, it says we have the 5 leading tourist destinations and millions of visitors. So France gets 76.8 million tourists. I don't know which year this is for, to be honest with you. US gets 59.7, China gets 55.7, Spain gets 52.7, and Italy gets 43.6. So we've got these 5 tourist destinations, and we want to create a pie chart or circle graph that represents the popularity of that destination within the top 5, meaning what portion of visitors are going to that one country of the top 5 places. Okay, so that it's their relative popularity to each other. So in order to do this, we obviously have created our table in Google Sheets, and we want to come up with a percent of the total. So we want to know what of the total number of visitors to those 5 destinations went to France. So we can't come up with the percent unless we find the total amount, okay? So this is where we're using our sum feature, if you remember. So we're going to do equals sum, and we want to have it do the sum from B2, meaning where France starts, down to B6, where Italy is. So remember, to find the sum, I'm going to hold my mouse key on the first location, drag straight down through my last location. So you can see it goes from B2 : to B6. You can type that in. You don't have to use the mouse. Either way, that's what we want our equation to be. So then once we have our sum, now we can come up with our percentages, okay? So to find the percent, it's the part as compared to the whole. So when I'm saying the part, we're saying the number of visitors in France, 76.8 million, as compared to the total number of visitors amongst those 5 countries, 288.5 million. So here I'm going to do equals, and I want to do France divided by my total. And again, we're always trying to get Google Sheets to do the work for us. So I am using cell locations here. That's why I have B2 divided by B8. And I'm going to press enter. And in case it doesn't format as a percent, up here, you can click this percent sign and it will format as a percent that way. So it might come up with 0.26 as your answer. So once you click as format as percent, it should convert it to 26.62%. So now I want to double click and fill down. So what's my problem? Why did it suddenly do division by 0? So if you remember, when I double click and fill down, it's now saying we'll divide by B9. I don't want to divide by B9. I want it to divide by B8 every single time. So if you were doing this on your own, what would we want to change here to make sure that I divide by B8 every single time? So I think about going back to my very original equation that I tried to fill down. I want you to think back, look back in your notebook to what we talked about in 1B, in the second part of 1B. And what did we have to do to make sure that we divided or used the exact cell location every time?
You want one of us to answer that?
I'm sorry?
Did you want one of us to answer that?
Yeah, if you want to type it to me, if you want to answer out, I don't care what you want to do.
I believe it's a $ before the B and then before 8, in this case, before the column and row that you want to repeat.
Right. So we need to use fixed cell locations, right? And the way that we fix the cell location is by inserting $. So we want to do a $ before B, and then a $ before 8. And once I do that, if I press enter, it's going to not change that amount. But if I go back up, let's delete these out. I go back up here and I double click, it now fixes my problem. I don't have division by 0 listed in there anymore. And it's now giving me actually what the percents are. So we can see that in those 5 countries, 26% of those visitors went to France. 20% of them went to the United States, 19% to China, 18% to Spain, and 15% to Italy. Now, in case we want to see, hey, did I actually do this right? We can do a sum here from C2 to C6. And what we're hoping to see here is 100%. We get 100%, so we know that we have those percentages laid out, okay? So the last thing we want to do is we want to highlight our data and insert a circle graph. So we only need the country name and the percent, okay? So in order to, or excuse me, not the percent, we need the country name and the quantity. So I'm only going to highlight this data here. So countries and the visitors. I'm going to go up to insert chart. And of course, it gives me a suggestion. If it didn't give us the suggestion we wanted, over here under chart type, you've got suggestions. And then if you scroll down, there's all these different. So instead of a pie, let's say we wanted a donut. I don't know, you can have, or we want one of these crazy 3-dimensional ones, right? Or we can just stick with what the suggestion is, okay? I think there's a way to change the colors in pie slice. Yeah, so for France, if you don't like that blue, you can make it a different color, okay? That's how you can make it come out if you're trying to like do something that shows, makes you focus on it. That's how you're taking it out from the center. We'll leave it at 0. I want to change the US to, I don't know, purple, right? This is how you can change all your colors if you don't like the color scheme they came up with. Under your chart type, you can give your labels, your slice label, right? So we've got those in here. So there's all these different things that you can change in here to give it, you know, to customize it. Okay, if you want borders, we're gonna put black borders in, which will divide it up, make it easier to see. All I'm trying you to see is that you have some control with how, and then once you've got it all set up, you X out, and then you've got your, if you don't like the name, if you double click on it, this will help you to change your chart title. Okay, so then you can, so visitors in millions. I want to say to top 5 tourist destinations, right? Gives us more information. So, like I said, Google Sheets is super powerful and it does a lot for you, but just let it work for you, right? Don't do more work than you have to. So questions for me. So today's lecture is pretty fast. To go over, I want to look at one of your homework questions, just to give you an idea of what you need to do for it. So I'm going to pull up your homework really fast. Also, remember today is your first quiz. Make sure you take that and make sure you upload a scanned copy of your notes to the quiz 1 assignment box. As you're completing your quiz, you have the little box at the corner that says go to next, go to next, go to next. Make sure at the very end you don't press submit if you were planning on going back to anything. If you did want to go back to a question at the top, if you click the question, it's going to give you a drop down with all the questions on it. And so you can click back on something if you wanted to go back to it, because there is the possibility of going back to what you maybe skipped or something like that. So just make sure you don't press submit quiz at the end if you're planning on going back, because then that's your quiz, right? So like you get one chance. So make sure that you go back and check your work. Don't press submit till you're completely finished. And you have 40 minutes to take a quiz. Okay, that would be, and also don't forget that you need to complete the quiz review first with 75% in order to even take the quiz. So give yourself enough time. is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. So make sure you've got enough time for all of that. So 1D, pull up the homework assignment. Okay. Okay, so here it says, professor records the following grades in one course. Construct a frequency table for the grades. So when we're looking at the frequency of A's, that means we're going to go through and count. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 A's. Okay, so I would put a 5 here. Okay. The relative frequency is how many times the A occurs out of all the possible grades. So you do have to go through and count. So we had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which gives me 24 grades. So we would do 5 divided by 24. I have my calculator in front of me. Oh, wait. Let's pull this bad boy up. Let me change what I'm sharing. Okay, so I'm going to do 5 divided by 24, which gives me 0.2083, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to multiply this by 100. And then you can see here, it says type an integer or decimal rounded to the nearest tenth. Do not round your percent until you've multiplied it by 100. So here, now that I've multiplied it by 100, I get 20.83. The 3 rounds the 8 to stay. So I'm going to enter 20.8% there. And then the cumulative frequency is just you're adding up the frequencies. So right now our cumulative frequency is 5. Okay. So now I press enter. It tells me good job. And then it goes to the next row. So unfortunately, it doesn't allow you to get everything done and then check at the very end. It's going to make you check as you go through. So now the number of B's, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 B's. Still out of 24. So over here on my calculator, I'm going to do 6 divided by 24, which gives me 0.25. I multiply that by 100, which gives me an even 25%. So here in the relative frequency, I'm going to put 25. And then over here in the cumulative frequency, I've already had 5 A's. I now have 6 B's, which gives me a total of 11. So you can see I'm adding those together. This is kind of like what we were doing in our Google Sheet. And so then I'm going to press enter. And it gives you all sorts of varying degrees of good job, woohoo, blah, 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 right? And so you would keep going. If you're having a hard time seeing the data here, if you click on copy, so it looks like you can open in Excel. You can try to copy the data to somewhere else to maybe see it more easily. I don't know if opening in Excel is going to make it easier for you. But those are other ways that you can see it.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
So I already did this homework assignment, but the problem that I kept running into was there was different ones where you can, magnify it so that you can see it, but some of the data, like it was all clustered together and you weren't able to magnify it. Is it a possibility to, I guess, do that on future assignments, or?
What do you mean?
Well, so my problem is that I mix up the numbers sometimes when they're really close together. And so there wasn't really an option of like magnifying the data so that you could look at it closer.
Right.
Some of it was like really small and packed together.
Right. So if what I would do is that if you click on the screen, so like, let's see if we can come up with, yes, we do want to leave. We'll come back to it. Okay. Trying to find one. Blah, blah, blah. Oh my gosh. So like this, if it's hard to see this.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you are clicked into the screen, oops, I don't want that as my solution. Oh, well, it wants me to do it. So if I clicked on the screen, I press control and the plus sign, it's
Okay.
gonna make my screen get bigger, which is then gonna allow me to see these a little bit better.
Okay.
So that's how I do it.
Yeah, I was just curious. I was able to do it. It's just, it was really hard.
Yeah. So that's how I make them bigger. So do control plus when you're in the screen, it'll blow things up for you. And then you can try to match, population age 38.7. So I want something that's less than 40, which looks like this one, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to say, okay, well, does it match the rest of them? And so forth. Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay. So tomorrow, I'm trying to say tomorrow, I'm going to go over the quiz and the most commonly missed questions. And then also, because it's crazy and it's this kind of week, this is our only actual class other than tomorrow's class. And so 1E is what we're going to do on Monday. And that has a Google Sheet on page 21 that you need to prep. Okay. So the other thing, because I had 2 people show up last Thursday, so you have to spend 50 minutes somehow. So either with me on Thursdays, or you need to be logging time in the Foundational Math Center. So either way, you have to get credit somehow. And so if you're not able to go to the Foundational Math Center, you got to come see me on Thursday on Zoom at 2 o'clock. Okay, so like those are the only 2 ways, unfortunately, that you can get your extra 50 minutes in. Okay. So I hope to see you, as many of you tomorrow as possible. Make sure you get your quizzes done. Like I said, we will be going over the most commonly missed problems today or tomorrow, excuse me. So I'll be grading those furiously in the morning before we meet. Oh, one last thing, because I've had questions about this. There are 16 questions on the quiz. It says it's out of 24, and that's because some of the questions are worth more than 1 point. So it's worth 24 points, but there's only 16 questions. So it's okay if you get through it and you're like, well, I didn't have 24 questions. So it's been something I've received a couple emails about.
That would have been my question. Because I got to question 16 and then I clicked on it, I thought there was another one. I was like, what? I had like 5 minutes left. What happened?
Right. And that's where don't press the submit until you go to the top. So let me just show you what I'm talking about.
I did the exact same thing. So
Yeah, hence why I'm telling you. So
Glad I'm not alone.
I'm going to preview the quiz so you can see what I'm talking about. So I don't know why it's giving you a check answer thing here. The whole layout has changed, so I'm not really sure, but it'll give you, and I guess I'm just going to put a number in. I know it. I guess it's telling, did this happen to you all when you were completing it? Did it give you, okay, that's new. I don't know why it's doing that because it's not supposed to give you that.
It never gave me that.
Okay.
It just took me to the net. That was on the homework. It did that, but not on the actual
Right.
quiz.
I don't know what's going on.
I had to do it like, I think at the beginning, and then I was just like getting really annoyed.
Yeah.
It's because it gives you 3 chances to get the answer before it's wrong.
Well, that's the
But
review.
not on the quiz, it
quiz is
doesn't.
red, I think.
No, on the quiz,
Oh,
it
I'm
doesn't
looking
tell
at the
you at
quiz
all.
review. That's the problem. Oh my goodness. All right. Hold up. There we go. So here where it says next, are we all seeing this? Yes. Okay. So if you just keep pressing next all the way through. You can also press the right arrow key. If you get into the habit of pressing next and you don't realize that there's only so many questions, I want you to notice it suddenly changes to submit quiz and it's the same color, right? So if you're not aware of that and you press submit quiz, then your quiz is out. But make sure if you click on this you can go back and forth, and then up here, the 3 lines is how you get to where all the questions are. So you're like, oh, I forgot to do question 8. I can go back to do question 8. Okay. So I didn't realize how the layout was different now because Pearson changes these things on us all the time, and we just try to roll with it. So again, tomorrow at 2 p.m., the Zoom link is in our Eagle Online course page, right? If you go to Zoom links, it's labeled as, right? We hit content, we hit Zoom links, and then there's weekly tutoring link. That's the link you want to click for tomorrow. And the reason why it's different than our weekly class schedule is that some of my other students have this link that are in my other 94 class. And so they might show up in that time too. Okay.
I do know that a lot of kids, well, I don't know if they're like all in my class, but there was a bunch of, 094 like kids in the math center last week. So I don't know if that's the reason why we all didn't attend it.
Oh, no. And like I said, it's okay. You just have to do one or the other. Like, I'm not offended if you don't show up to hang out with me on Thursdays. It's not going to hurt my feelings. Just know if you're not hanging out with me, you better be in with Darby at some point during the week, logging your 50 minutes. Like it doesn't matter as long as you're doing one or the other, or else you're missing out on required time. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that. So, okay, that's all I have. I don't want to keep you more than you need to, but if you have more questions, I'm happy to go over them. And if not, use this time to do homework and prep for your quiz if you haven't taken that. All right. All right. Well, have a good day, everyone. I'll see you, some of you, hopefully, maybe all of you. We'll find out tomorrow.